In our contemporary atheistic, materialistic time period, we tend to speak of a universal language. And we speak of that universal language as the language of mathematics. I don't know about you. I'm not a mathematician. Maybe a mathematician would feel different. But when I think of mathematics as a universal language, it kind of gives me a little bit of depression. Because it's not that interesting. I mean, it's interesting in itself, but if I started speaking to you in equations, I don't know how well that would go. I'm not sure I could preach the gospel using mathematical equations. However, at the reception of the Holy Spirit, the apostles were able to speak some sort of language that allowed everyone in their presence to understand them. Now, we do not know precisely what this language is. However, for nearly 2,000 years, or at least if you want to count it, about 1,200 years, the Church has, in her wisdom, attempted to replicate in some way this universal language. And I'm not speaking about the use of Latin, because throughout the entire Church, Latin is not the language of the liturgy. Some places it's Greek, in some places it's Aramaic, in some places it's Old Slavonic. And then nowadays, in the modern time, we have all the modern languages as well. That's not how the Church has attempted to have a universal language. The language that the Church has used to speak to every human heart throughout time has been music. And as we know, music is a form of mathematics. It is, after all, a universal language. But it's something more. And in fact, we are so blessed here at Holy Rosary to have a beautiful and amazing example of this universal language. The tradition of sacred music is not something that is extra. It's not something that is extraneous. It is something that is integral to the life of the Church. It is integral to the solemn celebration of the liturgy. Throughout all time, the Church has always felt this way. Properly speaking, the Church desires that the readings are chanted, and that all of the parts of the Mass, the antiphons and the prayers, are sung. And in fact, you can preach the gospel with music. The gradual, or in this case, in this season, the greater Alleluia, is historically known as the first homily. Hearing those intervening chants moves the heart and the spirit to the contemplation of God and the things of God. And it prepares all of us here present for the reception of hearing the solemn chanting of the gospel. And in fact, within the tradition of chant in particular, within the tradition of chant, there is an attempt to represent this very work of the Holy Spirit within the Christian soul in the music itself. If you take just simply the Alleluias, you have its verse, and then you have what's called at the end of an Alleluia, its jubilation. And that jubilation is just that last syllable being held on to for any number of neumes after that. And what is being attempted here, in a feeble human way, but in a real way, it's an attempt to represent the groanings of the Holy Spirit within us, reaching out into prayer in inexpressible words to the Father, because none of us are able to pray as we ought. And yet, the Schola, those who chant this Mass on our behalf and with us and for us and lead us in the music, they themselves represent the Holy Spirit in the midst of the church, groaning to the Father, asking, pleading, interceding, and reflecting. And so we, who hear and are present to this beautiful ritual, this beautiful tradition of chant, this beautiful tradition of sacred music, we are to be engaged in attentively, openly, and actively listening to the words of the sacred music. And allow the notes, allow the neumes, allow the movement of the music to move your soul, to move your heart, and to move your mind into the contemplation of God. And this transcends every culture. Sacred music has the same effect wherever you go. You could be in the meanest hut in the Congo, or you could be in a high-rise church in Manhattan. And this language, this sacred language of music, which adorns the texts of the gospel, speaks to the human heart. Whether you are a Greek or a Jew, a New Yorker or an Oregonian. So we should be grateful, first of all, we should be grateful for those who spend their life in perfecting and pursuing this vocation of being a musician, a sacred musician within the church. It is one of the most noble and beautiful and helpful positions in the church. We should be very grateful. Because not only is it beautiful and a great art, but it is such a wonderful and magnificent aid to our prayer. Pope St. Pius X, when he described sacred music, one of the things that he described about it is that, first of all, it must have the text of the tradition, of the prayers of the church, and of the sacred scriptures. It must be the words that have been handed on to us through that tradition. And that's what we find today, par excellence, even in the sequence here. And then that music is not to overwhelm the text, but rather it is to articulate it and to adorn it. To help articulate the text and to adorn it. And by doing so, it moves us. Not in our passions, like popular music does. Popular music is ordered to the movement of our passions. It follows the beat of blood and of the heart and of the body. But sacred music has no rhythm. It's arrhythmic. And it is more like breathing than it is like dancing. If we understand this, then we can understand, and no matter where we go in the world, as long as we have sacred music adorning and articulating the text of the tradition of the faith, we have those sacred actors within the liturgy the Scola. Wherever we find them, we find this day of Pentecost. And so we can hear with the ears of faith and a heart burning for God the gospel that is preached in a language that is truly universal, the language of beauty, the language that moves us towards contemplation of the divine, of He who is most beautiful. And we take that song, as it were, in our hearts, and we bring it to the world. Not a silly song, like a Coca-Cola advertisement, but rather the song that is, in fact, that groaning of the Holy Spirit, those tongues of flame welling up within us. That is the song that we carry with us. We hold it firm. And we share that with the people that we meet. So contemplate the music of the liturgy. Pray it. Invest your heart into it. And if you lack an appreciation for it, gain an appreciation for it. Because the church desires this for you, to help draw you ever more closer to that life that we will live in heaven, which is singing, along with the saints and the angels, the praises of God for all eternity. And when we come there into that sacred chorus of heaven, we will be there to praise, to love, to adore, and to adorn our marvelous Lord with those voices that He has given to us, so that we may return the praise for all the great gifts that He has given us. And we begin that now in the liturgy, today. Let it permeate your soul and your body, and let it permeate your life.